Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the lecture. My name is Kristjan Kikerpill. I'm currently a PhD student here at the Institute of Social Studies. Previously, I obtained my master's degree in Information Technology Law, also here from the University of Tartu. Now, since you've already been introduced to aspects of open source intelligence, I'll keep these personal details to a necessary minimum. And now let's get to the lecture. So I've listed here three concepts, three terms, which will be central throughout the lecture. So first, impacts. We won't be dealing with the physics-related meaning of impacts. We will be discussing change and observing change and attributing meaning to these changes. The second is representations, which is also important. Now, which signs or sets of signs create what meaning and how. And the third term or concept is opportunity. Now, opportunity is opportunity, but it has a special significance for certain strands of criminological thought, and therefore it's necessary to bring it out here. So what is impact? Now, I hope that you already took a look at the overview article by Hearn and Buffardi, and if you did, you already know that there's lots of vagueness when it comes to the term impact. So definitions of the concept vary from very broad to very narrow. Now, if you look at the OECD Development Assistance Committee's definition, then impact is basically everything, whether it's intended or unintended, positive or negative. When you move on to the World Bank's definition, you see that it's far more specific and also formulaic. Now, you don't necessarily have to focus on just one indicator, but it is useful when you're trying to figure out what in your intervention or program brought about which change. Now, you have to bear in mind that these definitions are used in the context of large-scale international development projects, but we also need a way to think about impacts on smaller scale. But to go over what impact assessments or impact evaluations are, I've placed here two terms, impact assessment and impact evaluation. Now, when you get somewhat more deeper into the literature, you'll soon discover that there's quite a bit of ambiguity as to how these terms are used. So I've placed here impact assessments as the before picture, but they can also be the after picture. Now, with impact evaluations, they are more often used as the after picture. So given our geographical location, the likeliest of places you'll come into contact with impact assessments is European Union policy. So they conduct impact assessments before they're planning to implement the policy change. Now, these can be more qualitative in nature, and they can include a large number of stakeholders, whoever might be influenced by the planned policy changes. And now, impact evaluations are tackling the issue of attribution or the issue of contribution more broadly. And so you have to be able to figure out what in your intervention was the thing that brought about the most change, and to what extent you can assess this change. So when previously, for example, different intervention projects focused on outputs. So if we take an example of an international development project, then perhaps you want to improve the freshwater situation in a community. So you have choices. Do you just distribute bottles of water, or do you distribute bottles of water and install water wells? So you have to, when you think about long-term effects, it is quite obvious that installing water wells could possibly have a more positive effect. Now, how will we deal with impact? Since the previous topics related to large-scale projects, we also want to know something about impact as it applies to smaller-scale actions and interactions. So the way we'll break down impacts is into three elements. So the first element is a change or a consequence that you observe or become aware of. Now, I've placed two examples here based on the topics that we'll be covering. So let's say you open up Reddit, which is basically an advent calendar of human depravity in some parts, and you see a deepfake porn video of a known actress. So you weren't previously aware of this video, and now you are, and now you have to somehow internally deal with it, make sense of it. And the same goes for fraudulent emails or emails that you receive, which suggest that you are receiving a tax return, even though you are completely confident that you do not qualify for a tax return. So the second element there is exactly the attribution of meaning. So what does it mean, what I'm just observing or what I just saw? So it can mean different things to different people. For example, if your association with Gal Gadot is that she is, a decent actress, big name in Hollywood, you wouldn't necessarily expect her to appear in, a porn movie. And the same thing goes for these tax return emails. If you are confident that you won't be receiving a tax return, then you know that this email is either sent to the wrong addressee or it is some sort of fraud. And the third element then is the value judgment that you make on the basis of these attributed meanings. So some people are probably really excited if they see a deepfake porn video of a known Hollywood actress, because think of the possibility that this opens up, right? Now, but other people view it as image-based abuse, and so they're very negative as to what this may entail in the future. Because today it's a known Hollywood actress, tomorrow it may be you. And the same thing goes for these fraudulent emails. Now, if you understand that this is a fraudulent email, maybe someone who is qualified for a tax return doesn't get this point and then goes along with the fraud. So to briefly emphasize the importance of representations as well is two aspects. Firstly, both deepfakes and phishing emails or social engineering attacks make heavy use of representations because they need to somehow deceive you into thinking that what they are presenting to you and what this represent actually exists. Now, we never have all the information available to us when we're making decisions. And now this is the issue of bounded rationality. So we are rational beings and we try to make rational decisions, but it's always bounded to the information that is available to us. Now, I'm sure we would all like to have a lot of information or all the information available to us with respect to what consequences our actions will have for our future. But let me give you a paradox here, which is the omnipotence paradox. So if you know everything about the future, then you cannot change anything about it. But if you can change something about the future, then obviously your knowledge of the future is incorrect. So you cannot be all-knowing and all-powerful at the same time. So let's just limit ourselves to educated guesses and make those guesses as educated as possible. So the last part here is accounting for yourself in looking at these impact transmissions. So thus far we've been looking at it from the perspective of recipients. So the actual changes, the actual consequences, and what meaning we attribute to them. But you can also be the transmitter, or you have a plan of action in your mind that you want to achieve. There's some consequences, some change that you want to bring about, and now you have to choose the way that you'll be doing it. So the nexus element here you can see on the scheme refers to this action that you choose to take. Now let's give a simple example. Let's say you find a funny meme that you consider funny and you want to make other people laugh as well. So you decide to share this meme. Now let's say 10 people view this meme, 9 find it incredibly funny, but 1 finds it incredibly offensive. So this is this indeterminacy of what the consequences will actually be. But you also have this perspective of an external observer. Now to explain this, there's an easy to memorize example which comes from second order cybernetics literature, and it goes roughly like this. Let's say someone gives you a blank piece of paper and asks you to write something about your brain. Now, when you start writing, you'll soon discover that you actually have to use your brain in order to write about your brain. But in order to understand this, you have to sort of take a step away to see the whole process. Now, you also have this external observer view available to you, and it comes in handy in many ways. So if you are the recipient of a scam email, you may want to go along with whatever is written in the email, but if you take a step back and assess the entire impact transmission process, then you might have a clearer view of what it is that the transmitter is trying to achieve. And in a second way, you also have the ability to assess what possible impacts could have a transmitter wanted to achieve, and how recipients may observe and what meanings they attribute to certain changes by giving this external observer perspective. So you're trying to place yourself in the shoes of other people. So switching between these perspectives is very useful. And this is what brings us to the first group work. So for the next 10 or 12 minutes, let's do 6 groups and have a look at these imaginary headlines that are provided here, and know that this is the only information you have. So you have to use your common sense and previous knowledge to make educated guesses. What may the consequences be for these people? What is the meaning of such presumed consequences? And what's the value judgments that you make based on these meanings? So let's take 10 to 12 minutes to do some brainstorming and come up with some hopefully cool outcomes. Hopefully you had a very good brainstorming session and you let your mind run free. But now we're coming to opportunity and criminological thinking. Now, the beginnings of somewhat of a modern criminology date back to the middle of the 18th century, when authors such as Jeremy Bentham and Cesare Beccaria were standing up for the arbitrariness of punishments levied against people who have committed crimes. So there's this aspect of free will, that people choose to commit crimes, but in a society that was imbued with religious beliefs, it was difficult to attribute appropriate punishment for a crime that's written in law. Now, if we jump another 100 years, we come to a person who is better known as the father of criminology, Cesare Lombroso, who had a fascination with people's skulls. So he was trying to find out whether certain skull shapes help us determine whether someone is or will be a criminal. Now, of course, this then asserts a sort of determinism, that you can be confident that a person is or will become a criminal based on just how they look or where they're from and so on. So you've obviously heard sentences like, or phrases like, oh, these people, they are all criminals. So you make this decision based on some attribute which is usually not true at all. So a lot of criminology has focused on this aspect of criminality. So there's something inherently different or inherently wrong about a person which makes them into a criminal. Now, environmental criminology and crime science sort of flip the script. They are focusing or emphasizing more the aspect of opportunity. Now, if you are an aggressive person, you still don't go around 24/7 punching people in the face. There are certain opportunities which are more suitable for punching people in the face, and then you have to figure out why these opportunities emerge. So, and they started asking questions about where do victims and criminals converge, when, is more crime happening during nighttime? Why would a victim and an offender end up at the same place at the same time? And of course, more importantly, or most importantly, they were trying to figure out how to decrease these opportunities for offending. So one of the theories that I'm more familiar with, these opportunity theories, is the routine activity approach, which was introduced by Felsen and Cohen in 1979. And this is in large part based on Amos Hawley's theory of human ecology. Now, these three aspects that I've listed here, the rhythm, the tempo, and the timing, were very important aspects of community life. So the rhythm is the regular periodicity with which events occur. Let's say, for example, all stores in the city open at 9 a.m. Now, the tempo is the number of events per unit of time. So let's say the number of visitors to a supermarket between 10 a.m. and noon. And the timing is then the coordination among different activities, which are more or less interdependent. For example, if you know that all the stores in the city open at 9 a.m., you may want to open your store at 7 a.m. because you know people go to work before 9 a.m. So if you want to sell coffee and bagels, then you're opening your store earlier. Now, these so-called chemistry of crime approaches to the study of criminal activities are based on this information that people or criminals have about the rhythm, tempo, and timing of community life. Now, what Felsen and Cohen discovered or came up with in their seminal work was that although the socioeconomic situation in the US was improving in the 1960s, 1970s, the crime rates were also going up. So they were studying crime reports available for various cities in the United States, and they saw that even though people had more resources available to them, the crime rates were also going up. Now, what they also knew about social changes at the same time was that in post-World War United States, women who had thus far mostly stayed at home were also more often joining the workforce. Now, this in turn meant that family homes were empty for large portions of time during the day. The kids were at school, the parents were at work, so the house was empty. And now this created a very good opportunity for burglars. So they made these connections of how criminals exploit what they know about the rhythms, tempo, and timing of community life. Now, a big shift in this chemistry of crime thinking came about in the 1970s, when more victimization service became available to criminologists and those studying crime science. Because if you want to understand the different elements, the criminal, the victim, how it happened, then you obviously want to have sources of information available to you which cover both ends. Now let's fast forward to the internet. If it is necessary for people to converge in time and space for crime to occur, then how has the internet changed our convergence, right? So how has the rhythm changed? Does the internet ever shut down? No. How has the tempo changed? So how many times can you visit the website or a forum or your Facebook page? It's basically limitless. And the timing. Do we all always have to be at the same place at the same time? No, we don't. You can use technological solutions to create delayed messages, for example emails. You don't have to be there you physically in order to commit the crime. You simply send the email and hope that the recipient goes along with your scheme. And one of these technological changes which we have to be aware of leads us to the topic of deepfakes. Now, image manipulation in and of itself, of course, is nothing new. I've placed this image of Abraham Lincoln here because when they were running out of photographs, they just had to take a body double to create more. So it was Photoshop before Photoshop. Now with Photoshop in the 1990s, the way this just kept developing and developing, then came the internet, widespread internet. You can also disseminate these images far more easily. And I think we collectively owe an apology to the lady folk because as far as image manipulation has gone throughout our history, women have always, drawn the short straw in that sort of really bad competition, I guess. But deepfakes then are the new and scary face of manipulated content. Because when you think about Photoshop, you can enhance or alter an image, but with deepfakes, it concerns images, audio, and video. So it's a triple threat, and you can do a lot more damage with it if you want to. Now, for whatever reason, whenever new technology emerges, there's always one person who seems to think that, let me take this technology and see what is the worst possible thing I can do with it. So this is essentially what deepfakes are currently about. Now, at this very moment, we can still detect most of deepfakes with the naked eye. Results from a recent small-scale study suggest that people find these listed aspects to discredit the believability of deepfakes. Blurred faces, so this area usually is the manipulated area and is more blurred, while this is more sharper. Now, unnatural voice. If you synthesize a person's voice, then it becomes more bland, it loses some tone, and it can be still sort of passed off as the real person. Later on, we'll go to a case in which it had been used this way, but it also lacks, tone and these natural aspects of human voice. Now, you might also see lack of emotions or lack of facial expression because, when people speak, their face moves in a certain way, and these deepfake tools right now may not be able to capture it as accurately as you would expect. And this is also the problem of irrelevant objects in the background. So if you train an algorithm or a model to create faces, then you're not paying attention to the background. So the background might just be blurred or just random objects that make no sense. So you may also want to pay attention to that. Now, current themes with respect to deepfakes mostly concern politics and porn. There's a great article which just recently published by Gosse and Berkel, Politics and Porn, How News Media Characterizes Problems Presented by Deepfakes. Now, the first problem, deepfakes are easily produced and easily distributed, we've already covered. Now, deepfakes promote false beliefs. This brings us back to this issue of representations and how these are used to create or form these false beliefs. Now, deepfakes undermine the political process. We'll get to that in a moment. And the final one, deepfakes are used to make non-consensual sexual content. So this is again this final or currently final step in a long line of image-based abuse. So politics. Deepfakes in politics are an emerging problem. This is one of the first topics that deepfakes were related to, even though we don't really have very good examples or very horrible examples about how deepfakes have been used to really cause political mayhem. But the potential is definitely there. Now, if you consider, let's say, a deepfake of President Donald Trump announcing an impending nuclear missile attack on North Korea, it might take you aback because you may have already a previous belief that, yes, this guy is probably capable of doing that. Now, you can also consider these aspects of character assassination with the help of deepfakes, or making people say things that they have never said. So these are both related to the aspects of a persona and how you can discredit the person by, let's say, disseminating manipulated content about them. But deepfake pornography or deepfake image-based abuse is the current and a very real problem. Now, in a 2019 study, it was found that 96% of deepfake content currently online is pornographic in nature. So this leaves only 4% for all the other, political or funny deepfakes. And there are also open access forums where you can go, register, and request that deepfakes be made. Now, in my own very small study or an opinion piece, I visited these forums, and as I was looking at it, I looked at 3 requests. So the first one was for a TV personality. The second one was, let's say, for a semi-famous actress in a TV series. But the third one was someone just saying, look, I've been recently thinking about my high school sweetheart and I cannot get her out of my mind. I do have a couple of pictures. Can you do something with them? And of course, their response was, let's try. So these are openly accessible forums. I recently just checked. They're still, alive and going strong, so nothing has changed there. And this leads us to the issue of designer porn. So pornography has always been about playing out some sort of fantasy. And so you can use a regular movie set, hire the actors and actresses, and then, construct this fantasy the way you want. But what deepfakes add to this problem is that you can, hire or involve people that never said yes to participating. And this is the biggest problem there is. And this does not just concern famous actresses or actors. This concerns, based on the example from the forums, regular people. So everyone needs to be very aware of this. And this is also why you shouldn't make, everything about your life in picture format available publicly online. And the shared aspects, both in political deepfakes as well as in these image-based abuse or pornographic deepfakes, is the persona. Now, a persona starts with your name and your likeness, your image, and ends with whatever it is that you do and say and how it gets attached to then your name or your likeness. Now, there are different activities and examples available for this. Let's say if you hear Michael Jordan, what is the association that comes up in your brain? Maybe, an athlete, a winner, or, sneakers. Whatever it is, then these are the aspects that create this persona, in general and in the public eye. So, for example, if you are fighting for animal rights, you obviously engage in certain, let's say, you do some media participation, you do some opinion pieces, but then again, once you have created this persona, it also becomes possible to then discredit this persona. Let's say if someone publishes a picture of you wearing a big fur coat, so this does not bode well for you in terms of your persona. And this leads us to the questions of privacy and publicity. Now, privacy rights, very briefly, are your rights to tell others to mind their own damn business. As long as you are not violating other people's rights when you are minding your own business. So, yes, you should be left alone when you are at home, but not in case you are imprisoning other people in your basement. So this is basically the difference. Yes, you should have time for yourself to think your own thoughts, but as long as you are not, violating other people's rights. Now, publicity rights are about the control you have over your own use, of course, and someone else's use of your name, likeness, image, or other aspects linked to your persona. So again, think about, let's say, Michael Jordan or some other famous person, how their image and name and likeness are used to promote products. Let's say actors in some sort of perfumes or all the Super Bowl ads that you see and so on. So these names and these likenesses have incredible monetary value if the persona is strong enough. Now in Europe we speak about the protection of certain personality rights, and this can vary across jurisdictions. Sometimes the protection comes in the form of criminal law protection, sometimes only civil, sometimes both. But so is it just about celebrities? And does your name have to carry enormous weight and enormous monetary value in order to be protected from these misuses? And the answer is of course no, and this is a big misconception. Baseless attacks against your reputation and manipulations and use of your image and likeness without your consent, any sort of defamation or violations of your dignity, these are all aspects of your persona that are actually protected, and you can go to court if you want to, if you feel that these aspects have been violated. Now, of course, public figures must take into account that there's a certain heightened level of scrutiny regarding their actions, as much as they live their life in the public eye. But nowadays, it's quite difficult to actually sort of pin down who is a public figure, because everyone's publishing their own materials. Everyone has a blog in which they cover everything, from the color of their socks to whatever they had for dinner last Wednesday. And so people are putting more of their lives in the public domain, and therefore they must also be prepared that they get more scrutiny. So if you want to sort of briefly summarize how privacy seems to be nowadays, it's about people who want everyone to know what a private person they are. So sometimes this creates ridiculous situations where you're reporting on various aspects of your life freely, but then suddenly discover that, oh, I want to be a private person. So it doesn't really work that way, and you have to be aware of that. And now let's do group work again. So I've listed 6 persons here below, 1 per group. Now think, discuss and write answers to what consequences could this person experience if a pornographic deepfake was released about them in the media. Now think about how this may affect this persona. And what other ways can this person's name, image and likeness be misused? What could or would be the consequences of these misuses or abuses? Hopefully you had a good brainstorming session again. And now we come to the topic of topics, social engineering. Now, social engineering is any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in his or her best interests. Of course, we'll be discussing social engineering from the perspective of cybercrime, but just to make it very clear, practices of social engineering are used by everyone and every day. If you take an example of parents mock negotiating aspects with their children, right? You see social engineering there as well. If you don't clean your room, you won't get to go out. Or if you go to the doctors, I'll give you candy. So these are all these manipulations to get people to act in a certain way that may or may not be, positive for them. But social engineering makes use of these specific communicative strategies to pull off these manipulations, and they apply principles of persuasion. So you have to be persuasive in the way that you're trying to get people to act in a way that benefits you in some way. And social engineering attacks especially can rely, and often do rely, on salient current events to make these transmissions or these manipulations more believable. Now, an example of this, of course, is the current COVID-19 pandemic, but this can be anything. For example, when Kobe Bryant tragically died in the helicopter crash, there was almost immediately a scam about it, because people were then trying to pawn off or clickbait people into viewing, a video from the dashboard of the helicopter that crashed. So scammers are very much aware of how people view these events in public and how they are drawn to drama and all these, various aspects that make certain events more interesting than others. But the next thing, we'll be watching a video, and this video is to get you to pay attention to what I'll be speaking about with respect to the communicative strategies and the principles of persuasion. Now, just watch the video and we'll talk after.
DEF CON is the biggest hacker convention of the year. It's a place where thousands of hackers come to hear talks, to demonstrate their newest hacks. It's actually a place that's so dangerous to be on the internet that they tell you to turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth on your phone, and they tell you not to use the ATMs too, because those could be hacked as well. This is the DEF CON ballroom. This is sort of the main room where things are happening, and it's pretty wild. I think this is Car Hacking Village. This car is locked. Can you get me in?
I'll unlock it for you. Should be good.
Hacking is no longer like this fringe activity, and if you are at DEF CON, there's a good chance that you're here because you want to learn what could happen to you or your company.
Anyone here first time in the SCCTF? Holy crap.
I invited Chris to hack me with his team, but they're going to hack me using social engineering, which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and an internet connection.
We help people with human security, issues by testing vulnerabilities for like a network test, but it's for the people network. We test those vulnerabilities, see where the holes are, and then help people learn so they can patch them.
Can we try some of this? Can we try some, see if it works?
Yeah, we probably could have our star visher here make some phone calls as your
Let's do
girlfriend.
it.
Sure. Do you want to do a sample vishing call?
What's phishing?
Vishing is voice elicitation, and basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Who are you gonna call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider
Okay.
and see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm gonna spoof from your number, so it's gonna look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. My husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry, I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
gmail.com?
Jessica gets my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Shh. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account. Okay, my
Jessica
name
uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
is 5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry, so there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my
Thank you
password.
so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right, thank you.
Holy shit. So they just gave you access to my entire cell phone account.
You're gonna have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yes.
I really thought that my cell phone company would protect me. I mean, like, this is the most basic stuff, and they're not doing it. And if they're not doing it, you know all these other businesses aren't doing it either. Anyone with a phone and an internet connection can do social engineering. But I was curious, what can a hacker with serious coding skills do?
Well, DEF CON is the world's biggest hacking convention. It's hacking everything, hacking social, hacking hardware, hacking software, hacking various systems.
I asked Dan Tentler, a well-known security researcher, to turn all of his firepower on me.
I did get into quite a number of things that I found.
So what were the first things you did? How did you start hacking me?
I quickly found your Squarespace blog and had an idea. Basically what I did was created a bogus Squarespace site and sent an email to you, a phish asking you to go to this website, run this certificate installer.
And I did it, because
Yeah.
I'm an idiot.
So once you ran that, it gave me access to your computer, and I created several fake pop-ups that looked like system pop-ups that would ask you for your credentials.
You didn't even have to have my passwords.
No, you gave them to me.
I gave them to you.
Yeah. So I stole your 1Password keychain.
And 1Password is where I store all my other passwords. So effectively
And
by...
your social security number and your Amex stuff and all your stock trading and bank information. I can send email to everyone in this room as you. I am you right now, if I wanted to be. If my evilness is working correctly, it should actually be taking pictures of your desktop and pictures through your webcam every 2 minutes. And I have been watching you for about 2 days now. In coffee shops, at your mom's house, on a plane. Here's you editing stuff. There's you like.
Oh my God, so this is literally
every 2 minutes.
through my webcam.
Yeah, through this guy.
How badly could you have messed up my life?
I could have made you homeless. I could have made you homeless and penniless.
How?
Like,
How would you make me homeless?
Like I have control of your digital life in its entirety. I have all your credentials. I have all your access to all your financial information, all your work information, all your personal information. I can pay people with your bank account or your Amex account. I am you. I can fully impersonate. Like, the only thing I couldn't doctor would be like your fingerprints.
This is like as bad as it gets.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's bad.
So it turns out that Dan Tentler is very good at his job. I mean, he hacked the hell out of me. He got everything. I mean, frankly, I want to take my computer and throw it into the deepest part of the ocean, and I want to become a hermit, and I want to never touch a piece of technology again, because holy shit, that was everything. That was the keys to my entire life, and he just pulled them out of his pocket.
So hopefully after viewing this video you're sufficiently scared and ready to pay attention of how social engineering attacks are carried out. I will be providing a sort of more high-level view of these strategies and tactics that social engineers use, and I hope that these will be useful to you to avoid falling victim in the future. Now, the first communicative strategy we can call the Good Samaritan strategy, and this relies on creating a sense of gain in the potential target or victim. Now, this can be promising a reward, for example, a psychological or a financial reward, or filling a current need. And the size of the reward can, both positively and negatively impact on people's decision making. For example, if you promise a person, 10,000 euros, maybe they're more interested than when you were offering them 50 euros. But in another way, if you're offering people opportunities to do something, for example, discounts or other types of offers that speak to specifically to this person, then you're far more likely to get them on the hook. Now, the other strategy is the shock and awe strategy, when it relies on creating a sense of loss in the target or the victim. Now, individuals are far more likely to be sensitive to losses than potential gains, and this is emphasizing the importance of loss aversion. For example, if you give people the option of either stay at zero or lose another option in which you can either lose 10,000 euros or win 10,000 euros, then people have been more likely to stay at zero because they consider the loss of 10,000 euros far more severe than the option of the equal opportunity to gain 10,000 euros. So they will decide to stay on zero. Now, it's also useful to combine these shock and awe strategies and the Good Samaritan strategies, and mix them up to come up with more effective ways of getting people on the hook. Now, you can easily see these in supermarkets. All items are discounted, but only for the next 24 hours. So if you translate this into these communicative strategies, you can get all this cheap stuff, but if you snooze, you lose. So there's a sense of urgency, there might be a sense of fear of missing out, but on the other hand, they're also promising, exceptional gains. Maybe you actually want this stuff, right? So these Cialdini's principles of persuasion, and the first principle is scarcity. It comes in two main forms: the limited number tactic, for example, exclusivity. So think how your brain starts to function when you hear the phrase limited edition. So apparently, or immediately there's a sense of exclusivity. You can be one of the few who owns this, and this makes this item, let's say, more valuable to you, and makes you want to obtain this item, with more and more, so more and more your desire for the item increases based on the exclusivity of it. Now, there's also the deadline tactic. So this is basically the same thing. They try to get you to act fast, or you will miss the opportunity. And also creating a sense of competition about some resource is also motivating for people. So this is called the newly experienced scarcity. Now, you may not even have been aware of the fact that you wanted something, but if someone says, look, there's only 3 of these left, now all of a sudden you may start wanting this. Of course, this is something similar that happened with toilet paper, at the very beginning of this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, we never know what people want to do with all those toilet paper, but when someone said it might be running out, then people were, first thing in the store and fighting over it. So the second principle is the principle of liking. Now, people are more easily persuaded by someone that they like. And this can be, a physical attractiveness, or common interests or values. And this is a common tactic used by salespeople. So they try to appear as if they are similar to you in some way, or create certain associations. Now, let's say a salesman themselves may actually sort of hate fishing or consider it a waste of time, but when they are selling fishing rods to you, then obviously they love everything there is to love about fishing. And if, as long as you give people praise and say that they're doing well, and you look genuine while doing so, then you're highly likely to get them to act in a way that you want. Now, the third principle is the principle of social proof. If others like it, then I like it too. So the form this may take in online contexts is, for example, with products in online stores. So let's say there are, all the reviews are 5-star, and people are saying, oh, this is the best purchase I've made in years. And if there's plenty or enough of these, it might start convincing you that this may actually be a good product. Now, what scammers know, and what sort of, let's say, slightly less honest salesmen know, is that you can manufacture these reviews and you can manufacture these likes. So you can create this sense of social proof, or as if people have been trying out the product and finding it incredible, and you should buy it too. And so this also applies to sharing of misinformation. If you see some news story shared already thousands of times, there's lots of likes, there's lots of comments. Now, if so many others have shared this, it must be true, right? So this is a misconception as well. You have to assess information based on the facts that are available to you, rather than what other people are doing with these pieces of information, how they are using it. Now, the fourth principle is authority. Now, I mentioned here the Milgram experience, but I want you to read about it on your own, because I want to save this sort of surprise and shock when you read about it. As a teaser, I'll just tell you that, let's say, people are willing to go very, very far in order to obey someone's instructions if they consider that person to be of an authoritative position. Let's just leave it at that, and definitely read about this experiment on your own. Now, if people perceive a person or an entity as one with authority, they are more likely to comply with any requests that this person or this entity makes. Now, I've put an example here with fake emails, but I can also give you an example of directly from these COVID-19 phishing attacks, in which in the UK, for example, people received a text message that appeared to be coming, from the government, from the police, which suggested that since that person had left their lockdown, restrictions, had violated these restrictions, they now have to pay a fine. So, if your friend sends you this kind of message, you obviously dismiss it. It's just something irrelevant. But, when it seems to be coming from the police or from the government, who you view as this figure of authority, then you're far more likely to comply. And some people actually did as well. And so this also brings us to the fact that if people perceive a source as credible, they are more prone to rely on the information that this source provides. Now, this brings us back to, this information that you get from your friends. Now, if you trust your friend, and usually they provide you with, quality information, then you're also more likely to rely on whatever bogus information that they are giving to you. And let's say social engineers also can rely on this. So when they hijack someone's account and then start posting messages to this account's contacts, then it seems as if these messages were coming actually from the person whose account has been hijacked. And then people are maybe far more likely to click on these links or scrutinize those links, far less. The fifth principle is that of commitment or consistency. Now, people have a very strong drive to be consistent in their behaviors and the way they act. So if you always pay your bills on time, and you receive this message that you haven't paid your bill, and in 12 hours your electricity will be turned off, then you're probably scrambling to pay the bill, even though you thought you already paid the bill. Now, this is a very common scam, especially in times of hardship, as the pandemic or natural disasters. These pop up almost immediately. Now, commitments are also a powerful tool, and when you get someone to commit to doing something internally, you basically have them on the hook. Now, I provided an example here from Cialdini's own book, and toy stores use this tactic before Christmas and before holidays, because they will make it look as if they have low stocks of the most popular and in-demand toys. So when parents promise their children that they will be getting, toy X, stores will keep toy X in very low stock. Parents go to the store, all the toys, that they want have already been bought, so they will buy something else, give it to the kid, and then after the holidays are gone, they will go back for this specific toy. So toy stores just make more money. And now the sixth principle is reciprocity. And we are far more likely to return a favor than to just do favors. So if someone already shows, kindness to us or gives us something, then we are far more likely to respond in kind and even go, beyond what was given to us. So an example of this, let's say someone on the street, offers you a flower, and then you take the flower, and then they say, well, I'm actually representing, this charity. Could you please donate 10 euros? Now, since you've already received this flower, you might have an internal reaction. Oh, now I have to give something because I've already received something. And so this can be used also in online scams. For example, a very common example of this would be someone sending you an email, giving you a long story about how much money they inherited, and they need to send it to someone else because they are about to die almost immediately, and the only thing that you have to do in order to get access to, let's say, 50 million euros is to pay a small transfer fee of 25 euros. Of course, this doesn't make any sense, because if you have 50 million euros, why would you need someone else to pay the 25 euros? But people still see the size of this reward, and then they get on the hook, and they have paid these small transfer fees. Now, these transfer fees are also small enough not to be particularly interesting to law enforcement. And now if you take account how many of these emails scammers can send in one day, and even if they land 1 in 1,000, they'll still be making money, and law enforcement isn't particularly interested in this sort of small sums of money, or getting them back, because the investigation itself will cost more than the 25 years. And so it leaves people in these sort of very weird situations where you get scammed, but the only person you have available for blaming is yourself. Now, as a final thing for this lecture, let's use a case to bring all of what we've discussed together. Now, there was a news story. A company in the UK got defrauded and lost, 220,000 euros. So these are the consequences. The meaning, of course, what it means for the company's image or reputation, and since defrauding someone is wrong, the value judgment here is negative. So this combines into the impact that we've been discussing. Now, perpetrators use deepfaked audio of the big boss in order to get a CEO to make a transaction. So here we see the use of deepfakes, right? Synthesized audio that mimic the voice of the big boss. this is a representation then of the persona of the big boss. So if you get this message, even if you're a CEO, you're still, going to go for it, because if you do not comply with the requests of the big boss, then you're probably going to end up being in trouble. And this is exactly how these perpetrators relied on social engineering techniques, right? They used shock and awe. You have to make this transaction sooner rather than later. And they used a figure of authority. So if someone is the biggest boss, then everybody is by default sort of inclined to listen to this person. And you can read the story on your own from the link I provided. Now, this brings us to the end of the lecture. If you have any further questions, there will be a reading list, and you can check out the materials that are provided there, or you can also always send me an email to this email address that I provided now. And good luck staying out of trouble. Thank you for listening.